All right, guys, diving into some more sword and buckler work today. I want to touch up a little bit more on our sieges and application, kind of do a quick crash course review, but primary focus is going to be kind of the follow-up actions and what happens next. So we spent a lot of time working on sieging, driving in, and this idea that as I'm sieging, I always want to be moving forward. I don't want to get stuck here in these siege positions because I'm basically giving myself opportunity to do the strike and hit, and I'm not doing anything effective to close off lines, protect myself, drive through. A siege works because it's aggressive and it's quick and it sets up a follow through. So I'm coming in, stepping off, working from there. If there's a tactic catch and deal with, I'll catch and I'll push this down here. So this is the initial position that everything kind of comes out of. So again, I'm finishing in what I think of as 7th ward, the final ward, and footwork doesn't matter. Either foot can be forward, playing with where it goes. But the important thing is I've got my long edge down, I've caught, I've displaced. And of course, I'm using my buckler to keep my hand safe, but that's only to help emphasize practice. You can see from here, 7th ward, over the weapon, same thing out here if I'm out of distance. This gives me the opportunity to control both the opponent's weapons. So we'll have to pretend that my friend the Pell here has a buckler held right there because I don't want, because I don't want their hand to be broken. And that's, at least should be a very real threat, very real danger if you're fighting sword and buckler and not using this buckler defensively. Obviously, you hit by a weapon, but hit by a buckler is a very real risk. And it kind of ties into, as I said, what is the finishing play of all of 133. So as I drive in, again, we'll keep this really simple. I've driven in to my half schilt. They've thrown a cut from 2nd ward, coming in from this angle. I'm going to catch. I'm going to use my step to turn, drive, press this down. I'm going to finish in 7th ward here, right? So let's look at this. I'm on top of this out. I'm overbound. They're on my left side, right? I'm not over here to my right, overbound on the left. From here, drive in with your buckler. This is a Schiltslac. You're looking to control both of your opponent's weapons with one of yours. If their hand is here, if their buckler's here, keeping their hand safe. When you drive in, you can tag both of them, which frees your sword to come around. So again, really just playing this out, making this nice, smooth, and easy. Stepping in, we're in half schilt, a cut comes in from our left, we catch it, we press them down in the 7th, we have the overbind, we're gonna drive in with our buckler, freeing up to make this thrust. So, kind of a lot going on there. Something I know I touched on before, but I really want to emphasize, and this is really great because my Pell doesn't have the back weight on it right now. When I'm making this buckler punch, when I'm making this Schiltslac, I am striking and tapping. So you see the Pell's moving, it's moving a little bit, and I'm making sure it doesn't come toward me, which is a nice benefit, but I'm not sitting here pushing this. Because all this is doing is telling the Pell it wants to leave. And if you push on any kind of experienced sword fighter like that, they are going to back up. Or they're going to charge into you, depending on who you're fighting. But they're going to back up. This constant pressure is telling them to move, to go backward, to go away. If I'm driving and pushing, and then I'm trying to chase and stab later, like this pressure that I'm giving them here is counterproductive to me putting the sword in them. So doing this Schiltslac, it's important to keep this as a pop, right? See, just like that, it's important to keep this forward. If you punch it, it's going to rock back. Keep it pressed, keep it forward, keep yourself safe. So as we drive in and do the Schiltslac, we're here, we drive through and catch, same thing. I punch, but I keep it covered. Even more dramatic as the sword tries to pop out and stab me. Right, so I'm punching, keeping it in place, so I can thrust around. I'm not punching and driving and pushing, because again, notice, now the Pell is leaving, which makes it much harder to stab. So just practicing this motion is so important to any kind of smooth application interpretation of 133. So driving in, catching, setting aside, finishing in 7th ward, striking, but holding in place, holding over. Notice that space between here, because I'm not just pushing on this. And then the stress comes out. And I can tell you right now that working against 2nd ward is the easiest for your drill partner, but probably the hardest for you. It also gives you the one thing to focus on, right? Because everything is open and easy and there's nothing being crossed until that final motion. So facing the camera, I come into my siege, I receive that cut, I step, I push it down into 7th, I strike through, and this just comes up around that corner. Flipping, leading around, driving forward. The important part about this that makes this work is that hip lean I've at least indirectly mentioned a half dozen times, I'm sure, right? If I'm in this nice, weighted, comfortable stance, and I start doing this, my arm is in the way. You can see from here, right? I can't really get this out and do things without my arm being cut up a little bit. If I'm short in my stance forward and I really extend over, I've got all the space in the world to make this motion happen, right? Compare that. My chest gets in the way. I don't have any workspace down here. As soon as I lean up and come underneath my arm, underneath my chest, much easier than in that kind of squatted position that everyone kind of likes, is comfortable to fight from. So really just working on here, catching, redirecting, overbound on the left, Schiltslac, and a thrust with a Knucken. So this side is the easier to learn, the easier to see, easier to play with, at least as far as entering and moving from. Catching here, driving, pressing down, all this feels really good. Getting to this part feels kind of weird, but if that's the only thing you're working on, it's fine. Your opponent's working from 2nd, from the right shoulder. They're doing a simple cut. Again, if you do have a drill partner, we are not stepping with these cuts for various reasons. Just short answer is going to be that it's slow, it's inefficient, it gets you in more trouble than it's worth. So static cuts, staying in your ward, staying safe, staying protected, using that tempo, decide what's going to happen, what's going to move from here. As a sieger, really working, driving in, pressing down, sucker punch, thrust around the corner. So this play, as it is, comes far later in the book. The one everyone's used to seeing, everyone's familiar with, is when your opponent's in 1st ward. So again, 1st ward is underarm, under your left arm, under your buckler arm, however you think about it. You can throw a falling cut, but it's a much, much smaller falling cut than this one's going to be. They're much shorter. Or obviously you have a rising cut, which is just kind of a bad day anyway. So don't do those. So we're going to assume now that the cut is somehow coming from my right side, right? It's going to be exactly the same thing and a little bit easier. So again, I'm going to step in, go into my half schilt. I'm going to turn and catch from the left, pressing it down. Now I'm overbound on the right. Right now I'm on top of their sword, there to the right, overbound on the right. Really simple. From here, same thing. I'm going to Schiltslac, and I'm going to Knucken. And again, I'm a fan of just driving the point. It's shorter, it's faster, way more effective. If you have a longer weapon though, or if you're a little bit too close, you can just easily finish to a long edge cut with that same kind of hip motion here. Turn and fire, driving through there. It's a very short, very direct, very effective way of driving this in. So, same exact thing. I catch, half schilt, turn to my right now to make my catch, drive them down into 7th. I'm overbound, I'm on the right side, drive in, thrust, or drive in, cut. It doesn't matter. Whatever you feel is happiest in the moment, you're welcome to do, welcome to play with. The point is that these should be very quick, very direct motions. So again, facing the camera, half schilt, drive off here, strike, strike. If I want, Schiltslac, long edge Knucken. It doesn't matter. As far as the place, what it shows, it kind of shows a sword like this. Past the head, whether they're saying like, look, I could have stabbed him, but I'm not showing blood because we're priests. Or whether it's a long edge cut, it doesn't matter. It's whatever's there, whatever's easiest. The thing that does matter is that when you go to do these motions, especially this one, you don't want to wind up, right? I don't want to catch, strike, and pull back, because that gives them too much time, too much opening to react, move, to pull out, to change their mind, to realize they're in a horrible space. So if I catch and I strike, I don't want to start doing this and really thinking about driving this, because that's not what this is about. These are supposed to be quick, short, effective, or at least debilitating. Because let's face it, a long edge strike to the face, to the head, even if it's like a slap, isn't going to feel great in the morning. So really thinking about these as being direct, efficient, and smooth and tied down, and very minimal motions. I really like to tie everything down as smooth as I can. So I'm going to do that Schiltslac here. I'll leave this arm, turn the hip, this arm follows later. But it's all one wave of a motion, where it's catch, strike, strike. And it's just one leads to the next. They're very systematically tied together. So we have a little bit of time left. I want to kind of talk about some fun options. It'd be hard to demonstrate with my pedal, with my lack of a training partner. But I kind of mentioned before, 133 is really interesting because it comes down to basically one set of conditions that we can describe. Well, I guess 4 conditions would be over literal, right? So with my pedal, I can be overbound on my left, which we did first, where I strike and control. I can be, and notice, footwork doesn't matter. This is still overbound on my right, because I'm here, I'm outside, right? And over on my right, strike, long edge here. If I've messed up, if I'm on the receiving end of this, I can be underbound on my left. Likely I can be underbound on my right. And these are the instances where the other person has trapped your sword, knocked it under, and started doing things. But this is, those 4 scenarios, those 4 setups are basically the core of 133. You can have countless, I'm not sure about countless, right? But you have lots and lots of options of how the fight starts. So you can start in different wards, different sieges. You can start in somewhere between them all. But if you're doing things right, you're going to wind up in one of those 4 positions. From those 4 positions, the tree spreads back out again, because you've got a bunch of different options based on whether you're attacking, they're attacking, who has the initiative to attack and go next, how close you are, how far you are, whether you're driving forward, whether you're moving out. There's lots of things that kind of come out of these really basic positions. But the first half of 133 is learning, how do I get here every time? Ideally on top. But this is where we want to wind up. This is where we want to start. Once you have that, you can start exploring, cool, now I have these 4 positions unlock. What happens next? What are my options from these positions? And the most simple basic ones are when you're overbound, left or right, or when you have the overbind, is you do that Schiltslac and a Knucken, and the fight's over pretty quickly, right? No matter which side it is, easy follow through, easy drive after, moving from there. But if they're a little bit close, this is when some of the cool grappling plays come up. It probably look really ridiculous as I try to hug the longsword, but we'll see what happens. So one of my favorite ones is if I am overbound, they're on top, I'm going to step in, grab both of their weapons, pick them up, and line up my own thrust. I was not happy about that. So right, so they're driving in, they're overbound. This is one of the reasons why I say not to take that step. Because if I haven't stepped yet, now I can step in here, grab, hook, and strike through. Another really common one, popular, is overbound on the other side, right? This time, I'm going to, same thing, driving in, stepping, hooking over, and this time you just kind of lock both their weapons up, like this. My sword is free. If this worked right, I have both hands, both wrists locked up to kind of do whatever I want from here. So that's kind of the crash course of 133, where it's headed, where it's going. I'm going to start digging into some of the deeper plays, some of the counter war or counters to the sieges and things like that, getting some of the deeper things that will ultimately back down to these positions if you let them. There are kind of shortcuts that end the fight a bit sooner, but the goal of the art, the goal of controlling both their weapons with one of yours comes down to these ideas of this overbind, left and right, or if you're underbound, left or right, what can you do from here, and how do you take control of the fight again? So hope that was hopeful, useful, hope that was interesting. If there's any questions, as always, feel free to reach out. Austin Historical Weapons Guild on Facebook, so historicalweaponsguild.com, Historical Weapons Guild on Instagram, and all that mess. But just shoot us an email, send us a message through here, through Facebook, anything like that. And have a good night, guys. Thanks very much.